Going beyond the headlines. Asking the questions you want answered. Exploring government policies and how they impact you. We are delving deeper.
Good evening and welcome to Delving Deeper. I'm your host, Sono Lala. Joining us over the next few days are members of the National Advisory Committee on Constitutional Reform. We are joined with former House Speaker, Mr. Nizam Mohammed, and economist, Dr. Terrance Farrell. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
We have a lot to talk about in terms of constitutional reform. I know there's a proposal to increase the number of MPs we have right now in the lower house from 41
to 50,
and increasing that
right.
18
Yes.
to 59,
Yes.
I believe it is. How is this going to happen? Are we going to see changes to the boundaries?
Right. So what? Let me explain to you something about what is driving that. Right. At the moment, Trinidad and Tobago has a ratio of MP to electorate which is extremely high. It's like about 1 to 26,000 on average. Some constituencies have 28,000. In Tobago has 2 seats, so therefore they end up with about 22,000, right? In most democracies, the ratio of your MP to the electorate is a lot lower than that. In other words, the MP represents a smaller group of people, a smaller electorate. Ours is very large. We need to change that, therefore. We need to bring that ratio down to what is more international standard. So we are saying, and the number we came up with is 59 is not arbitrary in that sense. We are saying that if you had a ratio of 1 MP to say 18,000, 16 to 18,000, that gets you within the kind of ballpark in terms of what is accepted internationally and so on. And so therefore that gets you to the 59. So what will then have to happen is that you will then have to obviously change the boundaries. But the question of changing the boundaries is a matter entirely for the Elections and Boundaries Commission. But if they are told that the ratio that they are working with currently is to go from 1 to 26,000, to 1 to 18,000, well then they will then reorganize the boundaries of the constituencies appropriately.
Mr. Mohammed, we talked about proportional representation. Do you think this system will encourage more voters to come out on election day? Because as we talk about this, as you said before, Dr. Farrell, the popular vote will play a big role in this as well.
Definitely. I expect that there a new constitution, a revised constitution with proportional representation as one of its features will be very attractive and will give a kind of renewed hope to the large slice of the electorate that really is not excited about the first past the post system. You know, it is like a lot of people in the country look at a list and they say NTA, none of the above. So if you have proportional representation, my view is that that will be an encouragement for greater participation by the voting public.
Now the question of the popular vote, that's been a very interesting question. As you know, or may know, it was an issue that turned up in 2001, 2002, when we had the 18-18 tie. And when the president had the decision to make as to who was going to be the prime minister of the country. And of course, he did not select Basdio Pandey at the time, and he selected Patrick Manning. And many people have pointed out that really he should have selected Basdio Pandey for 2 reasons. One is that Basdio Pandey was in fact the incumbent prime minister, and so therefore for continuity he should have continued with Pandey. But also because the popular vote, the total number of votes that had been gained by the UNC was in fact larger than that of the PNM. Now, the popular vote is not something that features in the first past the post system. The first past the post system is not interested in what is your total votes. As I said, if you have a constituency with 5 people running and a guy can win the constituency with 30% of the vote, it means that 70% of the people in that constituency did not vote for him, but he still becomes your constituency representative. So the first past the post system is not interested in total votes. Now the question is, should we take total votes into consideration? Now once you have a system that has a degree of proportionality in it, it tends to take more of that into account in terms of deciding who gets into parliament and who does not.
Dr. Farrell has, in that comment, he has raised another issue, and that is you have a situation where the electorate makes the choice. And because under the first past the post system, we have had a tendency from independence until now to conveniently disregard conventions, which are unwritten rules that are followed as sacredly as the written ones. Conventions are used in a very haphazard and very unfair way. And the convention, when we had that 1818 tie, the convention then, as it is now, it is automatic that the incumbent prime minister continues and manages as best as he could, and it is expected under the first past the post system, he may have a premature election, that is to say,
an early election,
another election before the 5-year term, to which he is entitled to by law. But that is something else that has taken place in our country. And it has happened time and time again, where the erosion of conventions and the disregard for conventions, by doing that, we have really tainted the form of governance which we ought to be regarded as very, very sacrosanct and sacred. And we have had umpteen examples of a number of things happening coming down the line.
But just to pick up on the point that Nizam is making there about conventions, it's what in the report we call the software of the Constitution. A Constitution is law. A law is rules. There are rules and there are principles. That's what a Constitution is. But you cannot make rules for everything. It's impossible. You can't. You can't envisage all the possible circumstances where you're going to have to make a rule for that. And so therefore, the British system, the British have no constitution, by the way, right? So therefore, Britain developed a whole set of conventions about what you do when something arises, right? And everybody knows it. And when something arises, they just do it. Now, we have a constitution, so we have the rules. But because the rules can't take care of everything, when a situation arises, the question is, what do we do? And very often, we've done the wrong thing. Because we don't know and understand the convention. We don't know and understand the software of the Constitution. Let me give you a very pertinent example of that. 1990, the insurrection, storming of the parliament, the granting of the amnesty to the Muslimin in 1990. Now, the power of pardon is in the Constitution. The Constitution, however, does not say how the pardon is to be exercised. What happened in 1990 was that the acting president at the time was then encouraged to write the amnesty to the Muslimin to deal with the situation. The point has been made, and it was made by former Chief Justice Michael de Labastide, it was made by others, it was accepted by the Commission of Inquiry into the insurrection in 1990, that the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago has no power of pardon unless he is advised by the cabinet. He has no independent power of pardon. So the power of pardon exercisable by a president is subject to Section 80 of the Constitution, which says that the president shall act unless specified otherwise, on the direction or on the advice of the cabinet. And the power of pardon is one of those things that he has to get the advice of the cabinet, and there was no cabinet at the time. And that's an issue that Michael de Labastide raised. He raised it at the time, he raised it subsequently, and he raised it in his book before he passed away. And so one thing that we have done in our report is that we have said, let's clarify this issue. Let's clarify that the president he doesn't have a prerogative power like the president of the United States, for example, like Mr. Trump, for example, was pardoning people left. He has that power. Our president has no such power to do that. And so therefore we said, let's make it very absolutely clear that the president, in exercising the power of pardon, has to be advised by an advisory committee of parliament, and that committee should not be chaired by a minister, which the current constitution currently says, but should be chaired by a member of the advisory committee, but not the minister, who is a member of the committee, but not chaired by the minister.
So, Mr. Robinson, many saw what he did in the 1818 tie was wrong. It was it was against convention and all of that. But within that very time, with him as president, from the very outset of the Pandey regime, Mr. Pandey went with him, with a list
of
senators he wanted to appoint on the government benches. And all those people had faced the polls
and lost.
And had lost. In other words, Mr. Pandey was also contravening a convention. I remember Dr. Williams asking very able technocrats in the early days after 1976 to stay on for a further 5 years. He needed their services, but he told them, you have had 5 years as a senator, you'll have to face the polls. We'll give you safe seats. And they did not want to face the polls, and he did not have them. But Mr. Pandey went with a list. And what, in effect, Mr. Pandey was doing is breaching a very important convention. And I think he forced the president's hand in that regard. And what, in effect, Mr. Pandey had done was to spit in the face of the people. The people said, we do not want these individuals to sit on our behalf in our parliament. And yet, he used his authority by breaching the convention, which ended up as an arbitrary act, forcing the hands of the president. And there is where, again, we have really messed up time and time again by disregarding unwritten rules
and conventions
and laws that we call conventions.
The Speaker of the House of Representatives cannot be appointed if they are an active member of a political party. Is there any recommendation from the committee in terms of if this person who is to be appointed, if they basically cancel their membership from the party 2 weeks before, can they be appointed?
Well, I think the answer to the question that you posed in that way would be yes, they can be appointed. What we are saying is that, and remember, Parliament has its own rules, okay? Parliament has its own standing orders, and maybe Mr. Mohammed, who's a former speaker, should deny it. Parliament has its own rules. It has its own way of operating. And one of the things that we are saying is that the speaker should be somebody who is acceptable to all sides of the parliament chamber, both sides, government and opposition, and so therefore who has a degree of independence and impartiality, because you are presiding over the parliament, and you want to do that in a way that is impartial and that reflects a degree of independence. Now, Now, at the end of the day, the speaker is going to be put there by the majority, the people but they should be exercising that authority by looking for somebody who will be that kind of person, okay? So you're not going to take somebody who is so I would say somebody who lost an election and then bring him to be the Speaker of the House. No, you're not going to do that. But at the same time, we are saying that the Speaker of the House is not like the President. We are saying that the President is somebody who should be clearly be seen to be independent, who should have no connection, at least for several years, maybe never, with any partisan political party, and who goes through a certain kind of screening process before they are allowed to come forward to be elected as president. That's not the case for the Speaker. The Speaker is the Parliament is a political place. It's a highly politicized place, and the Speaker is part of that. Now, in the United Kingdom, as you know, the Speaker actually comes from the constituency. The Speaker is somebody who's elected as a constituency representative, and then what happens is that they say, well, we're picking X to be the Speaker, and that person actually goes, he sits in the seat, and they actually kind of take him and drag him up to the Speaker's chair, and he's supposed to pretend to be reluctant and so on. But once you get into that chair as Speaker, your duty, and then we talk about convention, your duty, your responsibility is to respect the convention, and the convention is that of impartiality. So yeah, I may have come from the Labour Party, or I may have come from the Conservative Party, but in exercising my duty as Speaker of the House of Commons in the United Kingdom, I am acting impartially. And the current Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle, got himself into a bit of hot water in the last Parliament, as you know, because of certain decisions that he made. So we are saying that you need to have, and we put it in writing, a Speaker who is independent, impartial, and that if you are put into that position, then it will be a good thing for you to resign your formal membership of any political party.
And that is not something that we have pulled out of the air. Parliament is too important an institution to be run by a Speaker who appears to be partisan. And we are trying to remove that kind of stain from the office of Speaker. Understand how this operates. When the Speaker takes his seat in the Parliament, he takes his seat immediately after the mace is placed in front of him. That mace symbolizes the power of the people, the authority of the people. It is the people who have put that Speaker there. How they have put him there? They have put him there through their representatives, because all of them can't do it. So they have put him there through their representatives. When he sits there, he or she sits there, the population must be clear in its mind that we have a Speaker who is going to give very, very judicious decisions and fair decisions, and run a balanced, a very balanced Parliament. The people must not ever at any time lose faith in any aspect of the operations of the Parliament. That has to be jealously and carefully guarded. I just, a little anecdote as an aside, if I may be permitted. After the insurrection, when I looked, they took the mace and they banged the mace and damaged the mace. And I was looking at it, and I was telling the media that this is the most horrible thing that has happened. I was a bit emotional because I was the Speaker at the time. And some journalists, they really made some derisive remarks about my reaction. I was looking at the power of the symbol of the power of the people of our country being treated in such a manner. And that is what struck me, because I was in a position to understand that politics is a science, government is a science. There are rules, there are regulations, there are rules of procedure, and those in authority must, as of necessity, pay particular attention, because they are the guardians of the people's interests, and they are the protectors. And I was in that kind of position in that time. So people see the mace being carried before the speaker and being placed, and we don't know the significance. And that is because it brings me to another point, if I may: lack of education in the science of government and the science of politics in Trinidad and Tobago, the subject that we call civics. And I know my friend has a mouthful to say about that himself, because of what we have discovered while we have been relating with the people out there during our consultations.
So I also understand the committee is also recommending a way that the president is elected.
Yeah, well, we're recommending actually two ways. We have two alternative ways. So the first important thing is about the president being elected or really elected, because right now, the system is that we have an electoral college, which is the House of Representatives and the Senate combined. But effectively, what that is that the president is whoever the majority party gets to pick, and that may mean whoever the prime minister gets to pick. What people have very clearly said is that we don't want that system to continue, that you want to have a president who is independent. So we exercise our minds as to question of how do you create that? How do you make a president who is genuinely more independent of the existing arrangements within the parliament? And there are two ways, right? Short of an executive president. One is that we are saying that the person is directly elected. In other words, the same people who elect the House of Representatives there would be an election for a president. That is interesting. It follows the Singapore model, for example, because in both cases, the case of indirect election and direct election, we have interposed something called a Presidential Elections Commission, which will be comprised of the Chief Justice, the head of the Integrity Commission, Chairman of the Public Service Commission, and a couple of other people. And essentially what they would do would be this. If, for example, somebody wanted to nominate Nizam Mohammed as a presidential candidate, the Presidential Election Commission would screen that person. There will be a certain set of criteria for eligibility for election of president. You must be age 45 or older. You must have a record of public service, either the public sector or in the private sector, person of integrity, etc., etc., etc. That committee would screen the nomination and then say, okay, Nizam Mohammed can go forward to be elected as a president. And then the election would happen. So it may be Nizam versus one or two or three other people, and the population would elect. The second method is what is we're calling indirect election, which is where you have the same Presidential Elections Commission, same process of nomination, but instead of going to the people to be elected through the Elections and Boundaries Commission, what would happen is that you'd have the Electoral College. But this Electoral College is much bigger than the current Electoral College. We are saying that this Electoral College would comprise every single elected person, elected by the Tobago House of Assembly, elected by the local government authorities, and elected by the Parliament. In other words, every elected official would then come together and constitute an expanded Electoral College. So you may be now talking about well over 100 people, because in the local government elections you have well over 100 people who are elected, local government councillors and so on. In that expanded Electoral College, the names would then go forward and then they would elect. And we feel that either of those two methods would then give you a president who is, in fact, genuinely independent of any political party who might be in the House.
Mr. Mohammed, the aim is to appear impartial. But in a small country like ours, where it's so small in terms of Trinidad and Tobago, if you throw a pebble from Cedros to Toco, you reach there in no time, but that's just a metaphor. But in a small state like ours, where a person's political affiliation is probably known, is this a realistic goal?
I think it is. We have had examples of individuals in the past who have actually been elected by the Electoral College as head of state, and they did not have any kind of political bias or political allegiance to any political party. And at the end of the day, heavy reliance has to be placed on the integrity of the individual. And that person has to win the confidence of the people and ensure that the manner in which responsibilities are executed do not suggest in any way that there is any kind of bias or political preference. And it is something that has to be, that individuals have to be extremely sensitive about. And that goes equally for the Speaker of the House as well as the head of state. In the same way, I don't think that we have had much of a problem over the years in our judiciary. There are people, individuals, who sit at the bar table, practice the law, and there are those who are prosecuting on behalf of the state and appearing and looking after the interests of the state on one side, and others who are defending or making claims against the state. And from amongst those, we select from amongst those to become our High Court judges. And the moment they go there, they ensure that they conduct themselves in such a way. So if we can, that they are not seen as being partisan in any way. And that goes a long way in actually preserving the independence and the integrity of our justice system. The question arises, why is it the same cannot happen amongst politicians and other individuals who hold these,
independent offices.
Special independent offices of state, and on which the state machinery relies so heavily if we are to ensure that we continue to hold the confidence of the public in matters of state.
So if I can expand a little bit on that point, and to make a couple of points in that regard. One is that I said before that your constitution is a set of rules and principles, but you can't make a rule for everything. We know that we are a small society and people are connected, so we just had a conversation about relatives and so on. But when you are put into a particular office, so politicians are politicians, but if I put you into the office of judge of the High Court, a certain kind of conduct and behavior is expected of you. Most importantly, impartiality. So what school you went to and who your friends were and what ethnic group you come from and so on becomes irrelevant to your discharging your duty as a judge. And the same is true of these so-called, what we call the fourth branch offices or independent offices that you have. The Auditor General, the Director of Public Prosecutions, the people who run the Salaries Review Commission, the people who run the Service Commissions. We have all of these independent offices. In many instances, they are appointed by the President, who is him or herself supposed to be, or we are saying, independent of the political interest and the political fray. That doesn't mean that they don't have friends. It doesn't mean that they don't go to parties. It doesn't mean that. But it means that when they are carrying out their duties and responsibilities of office, that they are enjoined, that they must exercise those duties and responsibilities with a high degree of impartiality. That's important. And we think that it is possible, even in our small society, for people to do that. We think that we have independent people who can demonstrate that kind of independence. Our judges do it on a daily basis, and if they don't, well, then there's a court of appeal. And at the end of the day, if you find that a judge or a police officer or the director of public prosecutions or any one of these independent officers is not doing their job in that fashion, what we have said in our report is that they must be held to account. We are saying that they must be held to account. And what we have provided for in terms of the recommendations that we have made is an enhanced role for the Parliament and for the President in holding those independent office holders to account. Right? And this is an important part of the report which I think may well be missed. And I think it's important that it should not be missed. The enhanced role of Parliament, which we talked about before in terms of scrutiny of those independent office holders. The enhanced role of the President in terms of oversight of those independent institutions. And then what we said is that the sections of the Constitution which are currently there, which is sections 133 down to 138, 139, which deal with the removal of people from office, are perfectly fine. So the process we envisage is that an independent office holder, your Auditor General, your DPP, your service commissions and so on, must come to the Parliament and say what it is they want to do, how they want to do it. And if they are not performing, or if they are displaying a lack of integrity, misbehavior in public office and so on, then the Parliament then sends that to the President, who appointed them in the first place, and the President will then take action, set up a tribunal, whatever, to ensure that those people are removed from office. So everybody has to be held to account.
Join us tomorrow evening as we continue our discussion on constitutional reform. I am Sanolala. On behalf of the entire group, have a great night.